A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you another book review today, so cheers. Gotta crack open a Cass. That is mighty refreshing. Excuse me. Okay. Now today I'm bringing you another book review, of course. Well, technically it's half of a book review, but it's not. I'll explain in a moment. Now, this book has been on my shelf for quite a while. This author flew under my radar way back in the day. The book I'm reviewing actually came out in 1989. I was reading horror then, but this author, for some reason, I only found out about him last year. And I picked up his first two short story collections that were condensed into one. And it sat on my shelf, and I always was like, I've got to get around to reading this. And I never did. And then talking to one of my little Plaguelands Media cronies, Dr. Luke Carman, he brought up this author, Thomas Ligotti. And he said, have you ever read anything of his? I said, no, but I've got his book on my shelf. And at some point I want to read and review it. That point is now. Now, I know for a fact that Dr. Luke Carman was actually reading this book at the same time as me. Not too sure how far he got. But the book is Songs of a Dead Dreamer. Now, there are two collections in one here, Songs of a Dead Dreamer and Grimscribe. I haven't started Grimscribe yet. I just finished Songs of a Dead Dreamer yesterday, actually. And so I figured I would take the time to review the first collection of Thomas Ligotti short stories. Now, these stories are fascinating. They're fascinating in as much as, like all short story collections, they are hit and miss. They start off good but predictable, go batshit crazy somewhere in the middle. It is a very wide range of styles, of material. You could call this a collection of existential horror stories if you wanted to go down that route. Yes, some of them are. Some of them are generic. There is a lot of influences from Lovecraft that you see here. But surprisingly, there is also some, well, at least I saw some influences from Charles Barker, Charles Barker. What am I talking about? Clive Barker. Charles Barker. What sort of a fucking moron am I? Clive Barker. I apologize, everyone. There are some influences from Clive Barker here, who was writing horror around the same time as Ligotti, because, of course, as I said, this book came out in 1989, the first book collection of short stories. So there are these influences there, but at the same time, the writing style is both unique and, I will say, very difficult to get into. This isn't a layman's book of short horror stories. This isn't your Dean Koontz of short horror stories. This isn't even your Stephen King of short horror stories. This is not accessible, or this won't be accessible, I should say, to a lot of people who haven't kind of experienced this style of writing by looking back at the early Weird Tales pulp authors like Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard and C. Berry Quinn and August Derleth, and even to a lesser extent Brian Lumley. He has a very unique writing style that is not going to appeal to a lot of people. And to be perfectly honest with all of you little Plaguelandians out there, when I started reading this book, after the first story, I was starting to get very frustrated because of the language and the almost esoteric writing style that Ligotti uses. But you have to understand, he uses it to his advantage. Okay? Now, did I enjoy Songs of a Dead Dreamer? Ultimately, yeah, I really did. I thought as the book progressed, as the stories progressed, they got infinitely better. It's the first, I would say, 3, maybe 4 that you've got to slog your way through before you start to understand Ligotti and what he's trying to do and who he's paying homage to and all of these kind of things. And then you can just sit back and start to enjoy the stories for what they are. Now, for Songs of a Dead Dreamer, there are a lot of stories. So much so that I've had to make a 2-sided list to remind me of the stories themselves. It took me a long time to read this, and that is primarily due to the writing style. It was something that I haven't encountered for a long, long time, and it was something that I had to acclimatize myself to and get used to. And if that's something that you don't feel like you should do when reading a book, then this book is not for you. And by all means, go away and read something that you are going to enjoy straight off the bat. I really, really recommend doing that. But if you want a deep dive into a somewhat twisted mind, then by all means, search out some Ligotti. Even if you just read 1 or 2 of his stories, you don't need to read the entire book, but just find some stories that resonate with you, that you think sound cool, read them and see what you think. And if you do that, by all means, leave a comment down below in this video and let me know what you thought of those stories. Now, I'm going to go through each story, but I'm not going to go into deep dives or huge spoilers, because that would be doing a disservice to not only Ligotti, but to you out there who want to go in and read and explore this fascinating collection of short horror. I will say, speaking to my friend Luke, I was ready to put this down. I really was. This was going to be one of the rare books that I just went, you know what? Fuck it. I could not be bothered. But I stuck it through, and I'm glad I did. So, I'm going to go in and talk about each story and each kind of subsection, because the book is split into various kind of subsections. So if you want to know what the stories are about and if they sound cool to you, then stick around for the next episode of...
Read a fucking book. Read a fucking book. Read a fucking book. People.
Okay, so in the introduction I said this came out in 1989. I actually misspoke there and would like to retract that statement. I believe Songs of a Dead Dreamer came out in 1986. Still a contemporary of a lot of horror authors at the time, such as Clive Barker, Stephen King, Dean Koontz, even the British horror authors, James Herbert, Sean Hudson, these kind of authors. So still in that same ballpark. Now, let's begin by having a look at this cover. That is, without a doubt, one of the best covers for a horror short story collection I have seen in a long, long time. It is creepy, and I have had instances where I've pulled this book out of my bag on the train, commuting to work or home from work, and the person sitting next to me has just given me a weird fucking side-eye look as I've put the book down and the covers kind of face up, and they've just kind of looked at it and it's like a what the fuck kind of a thing, which I appreciate that. This is the Penguin Classics version, of course, so that's why it combines the two short story collections into one. Okay, now the first section of this book is called Dreams for Sleepwalkers, and the very first story is called The Frolic. Now, The Frolic is about this psychiatrist who works at a mental institution / prison, and it's basically a conversation between him and his wife, and he hasn't been in this town for very long. This town is basically based around this asylum / prison, and he's telling his wife, listen, I think I should quit. I think we should move back to wherever we were. He has a daughter who's upstairs sleeping. Pardon me. And the whole point of this story is talking about this one inmate or patient that has no name. They call him John Doe. And John Doe has been arrested and convicted and ultimately institutionalized for crimes against children. What those crimes are never actually specified, which I have to give Thomas Ligotti credit for that. It's not something that's needed. Your imagination can dream up worse shit than whatever this guy freaking did to these kids. But he calls it frolicking. He was frolicking with them. And as the story progresses, this guy becomes more and more paranoid, and his wife becomes more and more paranoid, and they're drinking a little too much. And ultimately, this inmate has escaped and kidnaps this psychiatrist's daughter to frolic with and leaves him a note. It's a well-written story. The problem being, it is so obvious where it is going. By the first 4 pages of this story, you know what the outcome is ultimately going to be, which was quite disappointing, but very well written. It read, honestly, like an old episode of Tales from the Crypt. That's just what it read like to me. The next story is Le Fleur, which is about this guy who is obsessed with flowers, and he's part of this secret society, and he picks up women, and when they don't fit his ideal, they end up dead. It's bizarre, but well written. Again, though, a little obvious as to what is going on. Alice's Last Adventure. This was actually kind of interesting. This is about an author of a children's book series who bases her main character off a friend she knew growing up. And the stories are kind of dark child fantasy. I mean, it is a genre that is out there. I remember reading kind of dark kids books when I was growing up, and I fucking loved them, which probably explains why I'm kind of slightly mental. But she finds out that this friend Preston has passed away, and she goes to his funeral, and then kind of weird stuff starts to happen. It's not a bad story, don't get me wrong. It's actually quite unnerving at times, but not the best in the collection. Then we have Dream of a Mannequin. This was an odd one. Not much more to say about it without spoiling anything. But let's just say, when it comes to existential horror, you would put this as existential horror. This is the characters kind of questioning everything, pretty much. I'm not going to say a lot about that because that is one that I don't want to spoil, that you do need to read for yourself. Now, the next series is a group of 3 called the Nyctalop's trilogy. Now, when I saw the word Nyctalops, my immediate reaction went to Lovecraft, Nyarlathotep. Of course, it's got nothing to do with that, but that's just where my mind kind of went to. And if you can hear ringing in the background, there's just something going on at the Buddhist temple next door. Now, the first of these stories is called The Chemist. The Chemist is a really creepy... One second, I'm just going to shut the window while I continue talking. The Chemist is a really creepy story about a guy who basically uses people to grow things, flowers and stuff inside of them. It's body horror, but the best possible body horror that you can think of. It's really, really well done. Okay. Drink to Me Only with Labyrinthine Eyes. Really bulky title, but this is basically about a hypnotist who fucks with a group of wealthy pieces of shit. There you go. Great premise, great story. And then we have Eye of the Lynx. This is about a guy who goes to this bondage brothel called the House of Chains, and he doesn't want anything. He doesn't want to participate. He just wants to watch. And so the madam leads him around and shows him all these rooms and stuff like that. But ultimately, he is a serial killer, I assume, and he ends up killing the woman. Now, these three stories, A grade, Thomas Ligotti, body horror, phenomenal. Like, these were really, really good stories. If you only pick one section of Ligotti to read, I would recommend the Nyctalop's trilogy. That's what I would recommend if you only want to read a little bit of Ligotti to see if you like him or not. Okay, then we had Notes on Writing a Horror Story. That is precisely what this is. This is basically notes on writing a horror story. Almost reads like an essay. However, if you are into horror and you are into horror writing, actually incredibly insightful. I got a lot from this. I thought it was really, really good. The last time I have actually read something that inspired me as much was Stephen King's On Writing. So, there you go. Now we move into the next kind of subsection, Dreams for Insomniacs. Now, the first one of these is called The Christmas Eves of Aunt Elise. And the narrator of this story spends Christmas at his Aunt Elise's house, and she's a bitch to him, which is fine, but this is ultimately a ghost story, and it's ultimately a story of ghostly possession. The narrator has a very sardonic wit. It is really, really well done, and I can actually really associate with this character. He's the sort of guy that just sits in the corner at a family gathering and just spew shit about everyone else that's there because he fucking hates everything and nothing makes sense to him. If you know what that quote is from, leave it in the comments below. But yeah, I enjoyed this. Primarily, I found this funny. It was funny to me because I have been that guy. I have been to a family gathering where I've basically sat there while people have just been talking shit about me. And I've just, taken it, and then I've gone to leave, taken a couple of sausage sandwiches, smeared them over the windshields of my relatives' cars, and just fucked off. I've done that. So that, to me, it was fucking hilarious. The Lost Art of Twilight. This was really freaking cool. Can you hear that? Some idiot left his car alarm going. Oh, he's turned it off. The Lost Art of Twilight was really cool because the main character, the narrator, is a half vampire. Now, there is a whole backstory here about how he was born in the old country, and his mother was turned, she was pregnant and whatnot, and then his mother's servant got him out, and she raised him in America, and all of this kind of stuff. And it's really, really cool. And he spends his time like just painting pictures of Twilight, not the shitty vampire novel and even shittier movies, but Twilight is in like the time of day. And then some relatives from the old country want to come and visit him, and I'm going to spoil this one. It turns out that they are full vampires, and they end up turning him into a full vampire after killing his household, the woman that raised him and whatnot. Again, kind of obvious, but I didn't really care with this one because it was so much fun, and the narrator is so charismatic in his shyness and insecurity because of what he is. He never thinks that they would be full vampires. It was just a really fucking cool story. One well worth reading if you're a fan of vampire fiction. The Troubles of Dr. Thos. This was weird. Dr. Thos is this legend in town. Maybe he was an immortal sorcerer. Maybe he was a severed head with little legs running around. Who the fuck knows? But this guy starts to hear people talking about Dr. Thos. And then he kind of starts to go a little bit crazy with this idea of Dr. Thos. And then, again, another spoiler, ultimately gets killed by Dr. Thos. We never know what the fuck Dr. Thos is. Don't really care. It was fucking entertaining as shit. And again, you got to remember, these are short horror stories. If you're not entertained within the first 3, 4, or 5 of these stories, put the book down. Walk away. Okay? You're looking for a twist, a jump scare, an unexpected surprise in a short story. That's what you want. In a short horror story, at least. So, yeah, just kind of letting you know. Now we have what was probably the most surprising to me. This is called Masquerade of a Dead Sword, A Tragedy. Now, this is, in my opinion, this is gothic horror fantasy. And we follow this character of Faliol. Faliol is a mercenary. He's a swordsman. And he comes to this city that is throwing this huge festival. We get a little bit of a backstory of the land. There's these 3 cities. And this one is always the one that is a Solidari. This is the one that's always kind of serious. But then once a year, they put on this huge festival. And the Duke of the land, or whatever he is, kind of allows people to go apeshit. So Faliol comes to this city of Solidari. He has a job to do. He goes into this tavern, and even though he's in disguise, people recognize him, and these 3 bullies kind of fuck him up a bit, and they steal his glasses. Now, his glasses are made of this smoked, like this black smoky glass, and he ultimately ends up wounding these guys, and the guy that stole his glasses, he makes him put the glasses on, and that guy's mind just gets fucked up, and he's just like catatonic. Faliol has been hired by this guy who is in love with this woman, and this woman has been kidnapped by the sorcerer, and the problem is the sorcerer has petitioned the king that if you let me marry her, I can make gold using alchemy, and you will be forever wealthy. And also the girl's father will be wealthy as well. So this guy hires Faliol to go to this masquerade ball and bring this girl back, and they will be reunited, and everything will be fine. So that's just the first chapter. There's 3 chapters of this story. In the second chapter, we learn how Faliol got his smoky glasses. And he goes to a mage and he says, I'm cursed with madness. And it's this very philosophical conversation on where madness comes from and how madness comes about and whatnot. And this mage creates these glasses that when he puts them on, he will no longer feel madness. He will no longer feel anything. No empathy, nothing. He will just be cold inside, but he won't be slowly going mad. So that's how he gets the glasses. Then we go to the masquerade ball. Faliol is dressed as a jester, and the person that hired him is dressed as a knight. They go into the ball, but the whole thing is a fucking scam. The mage that made the glasses is the one that's masquerading as the sorcerer, and so Faliol knows all I got to do is go up, get them together, get them out, we get the money, everything's cool. Doesn't happen like that. The mage has been killed by the real sorcerer, and Faliol goes, gets the girl, the knight and the girl kind of go off together, and the sorcerer, Faliol realizes, hold on, that's not the mage. The sorcerer casts an illusion on the couple that are fleeing and turns them into monsters, which the rest of the guests of this masquerade ball then proceed to fucking beat to death. Absolutely graphic, disgusting horror. Some of the best writing of Ligotti so far. Faliol realizes what has happened. At this point, he chases the sorcerer down. The sorcerer takes the glasses and smashes them. So then we get Faliol going into his kind of rage form. And the sorcerer says, you work for me now. You're going to go out there dressed as a jester. Fucking did it again. Jester. And you are going to entertain the masses. And if you try anything, I will kill you. So he goes out there and the masses are like, yay, it's the jester, yay. And they lift him up and he realizes what is happening. He ends up tearing his own eyes out, bleeding to death. And then the masses realize that they're just carrying the corpse of the jester. And that is where that story ends. It was truly, for me, the fucking highlight of the book so far. And I say so far because there are more stories coming and they just get better and better. But this was Masquerade of a Dead Sword, a Tragedy, was some of the best gothic fantasy short fiction I have ever read. And I will put my foot down. This is my foot. It's going down. There you go. I've ever read. It was an absolutely phenomenal tale that had body horror. It had philosophy. It had action. There was a bit of everything thrown in there as each chapter went by. It went from action to philosophy to body horror. So there you go. That was Masquerade of a Dead Sword, a Tragedy. Okay. I am going to continue with Dr. Voke and Mr. Veitch. Wow. This one was fucked up. Mr. Veitch goes to this loft that is up this kind of weird twisted staircase to see Dr. Voke. And Mr. Veitch is in love with this girl, but this girl is in love with this other guy. And he says to Dr. Voke, I need your help. And Dr. Voke's like, what do you want me to do? He's like, anything. Just help me. I'm in love with her, but she loves someone else. He goes, all right, lead the two of them down this street tonight, and all your problems will be solved. And so Mr. Veitch is like, okay, thank you. At the same time, what's his name? Dr. Voke? Dr. Voke, in his studio, has all of these creepy, weird puppets and puppet limbs and mannequin limbs and shit hanging from the ceiling. And then at the far end, there's this booth with a fucking puppet dummy in it that just laughs. Think of that booth in the film Big, except with a ventriloquist mannequin inside of it instead of that stupid fortune telling thing. So Mr. Veach does this. He leads this couple down the street and he's talking to them, and they're a little confused, like, why the fuck is he doing this? I don't know what the fuck's going on. And then suddenly these puppet strings come down and yank the two of them, the guy and the girl, up into the sky. And when they're dropped back down again, they're melded into one. So they've got like two faces and all this kind of shit. And it is fucking disgusting. And Mr. Veach freaks out and he goes back to Dr. Vogt. And he's like, he sneaks into Dr. Vogt's studio. And then Dr. Vogt hears this laughter coming from his studio. And he goes out there. And Mr. Veach has tampered with the ventriloquist dummy in the ticket booth thing. And Dr. Vogt fucking freaks out. And he was like, what the fuck have you done? Blah, blah, blah. And this dummy is bleeding tears now out of its eyes. And so Dr. Vogt kills Mr. Veach and then realizes that now his whole world has been shattered. And then he just runs and throws himself off the top of the fucking building. And then he leaves the dummy there to just fucking bleed and be alone for the rest of eternity. This was body horror at its finest. It was fucking messed up, especially the description of when the guy and the girl come down and they're kind of fucking melded together. That was some messed up horror shit, which reminded me a lot of Clive Barker, very Clive Barker-esque in that sense. Sorry for the slight pause and weird camera thing, but I just had to kind of free up some space on the phone. So we move into Professor Nobody's little lectures on supernatural horror. And that is literally what this is, just a series of small vignettes on supernatural horror stories and why they work, why they don't work, and that kind of thing. Pretty interesting. Reads more like an essay, a university assignment, something along those lines, but pretty fun nonetheless. Now, the final kind of little area in this collection is called Dreams for the Dead. And the first story is Dr. Locrian's Asylum. This is about a town where there is a closed down asylum, closed down mental asylum, and the town don't like it. It doesn't fit with the aesthetic, and they want to knock it down, but it's kind of been blocked every step of the way. So eventually the town get together one night and they just demolish the entire place. The narrator is this bookseller, and he's been getting in these works of like esoteric fiction for the character of Locrian, who is an ancestor, or the grandson, I should say, of the original Dr. Locrian, who ran the asylum. And you find out that this guy was obsessed with the asylum. This guy's grandfather was obsessed with the asylum. His father, when the grandfather retired, had the asylum shut down. But there were instances where you could see figures in the window of the shut down asylum and whatnot, and it kind of freaked people out. And this guy is speaking to the bookseller and telling him the backstory of everything, and then the bookseller, it jumps kind of a little bit into the future, and the town is basically a dead town. People don't go out. When you walk past the house, you see ghostly figures in the window, and ultimately the town ends up burning to the ground. Whether or not that is supernatural in origin, we don't know, but it was a pretty fun little read. The Sect of the Idiot. This is definitely Lovecraftian horror. This guy comes to this town that he's been dreaming of, this old town, somewhat deserted, and he keeps dreaming of this circle of figures. If I were to put this in a Lovecraftian context, I would say they were Yithian, but that is never specified or anything along those lines, just by the description of them. And he ends up walking through the town based on his dreams and finding this group and slowly turning into one of them as he's trying to write down his last thoughts, which becomes the story itself. Really cool, really creepy, really Lovecraftian. The Greater Festival of Masks. This is basically Clive Barker-esque. This guy goes to this town. They have this festival of masks. He wants to get involved. He goes to this mask store, and there's a mask that's perfectly molded to his face, and other masks kind of dig into him and have, like, the plastic is kind of pushed in and shit like that. The owner of the store says, "Can you look after the store for a moment? I'll be back." And while this guy's looking after the store, these people come and they're like, "Dude, we need more masks." And he gets some masks and takes them to them, but they're the wrong masks. And these masks make everyone's faces melt. Almost, not quite like Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, but the masks kind of seem to be keeping their faces intact, and when they take them off, they start to melt. It's really grotesque, but really, really cool. The Music of the Moon. Again, I would say Lovecraftian with this one. The narrator has been told this story from this guy called Tresser, and Tresser relates this time that he's got insomnia, so he's walking through the city, and this guy hands him a flyer for this concert. And he ends up, all right, I'll go to the concert. And it's in this abandoned house. And he walks up these stairs and he's looking around all these rooms. And he goes into this one room and he sees all these instruments. And then the people come and they say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" "No, the concert's upstairs." He goes upstairs, but he's not prepared to go into the room where the concert is. So he stays outside and he hears this music playing. He knows there's people in there. And as he's hearing this music, he slowly falls asleep. And when he wakes up, he goes into the room and most of the people are cocooned and dead. But there is one guy who is alive, and he wants Tresser to leave him alone because the musicians are going to be back and then they're going to take him. The other people have no eyes and shit like that. Tresser freaks out and he leaves. And the narrator says every night he comes back and he keeps talking about this story. But slowly, it's less of the story and more about the music until Tresser stops coming altogether. But then this guy, having heard this story so often, becomes obsessed with it. And then he goes out looking for this concert himself. And that's where that story ends. Really, really cool. The Journal of J.P. DePau, or DePoo, who the fuck knows. This is just basically two people talking about writers, and one of them is convinced that there's no such thing, that there can never be an epitome of writing. And the other guy's like, "Well, what about J.D. Papur?" And then you just get this guy's journal about all of these horrific things that have happened to him that he kind of is committing to paper. It's a little boring, to be perfectly honest with you. I didn't get a lot out of this story, but it was fun nonetheless. The final story in Songs of a Dead Dreamer is Vistarian. Now, this is basically taking the dreamlands from Lovecraft mythology. This guy dreams about this place, this great city called Vistarian, and he kind of tries to find it and then meets these people and blah, blah, blah. It's the same old with Lovecraftian dreamland stuff. Now, I've left a lot out because, once again, I want you to experience Thomas Ligotti for yourself, and you can get the first two short story collections in the one book here. Overall, like all short story collections, there are hits and there are misses, and that's inevitable. It's just going to be what's happening. I thought I would hate this. After the first few stories, I thought this is a piece of shit. Thankfully, I was wrong. I really enjoyed a lot of these stories. I would say I enjoyed more stories than I didn't enjoy. And even the ones I didn't enjoy, they're not that bad. They really aren't. So if you think you would like to try something that's a little challenging for a short story collection, it is not for the casual reader, then by all means, I would recommend Thomas Ligotti. For the casual reader, stay as far away from this shit as you possibly can. That is all I'm going to say about that. So, cheers, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. But, most importantly of all, have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe. And of course, read a fucking book, people.